but the truth. And I believe it, and that's why I do what I do. So, and I know that we all respond to the science, the neuroscience behind things. So recently I'm reading this, I read this book by Christian Pelmas. And I'm not sure if I'm saying the name right, and if I'm not, forgive me, but it's called Trauma, simply. And just this, what really struck me in this book, this whole passage that I just felt this download in my body of how much in industrialized culture we are exposed to a low grade hum of trauma all the time. Just an onslaught of the daily survival of needing to do the fight or flight or freeze mode on really basic tasks. And then our bodies aren't conditioned for it, but we get accustomed because we have to carry on. So the body just keeps operating in that way. So we have this idea that trauma, oh no, I haven't had trauma because I haven't had a major life event. That's one type of trauma. There's 5 or more types of trauma, including intergenerational and community trauma, where something happens in our community and we feel it in our bodies because we're empathetic beings. So we have this low hum of trauma going on, and then we, as a coping mechanism, develop something called a negative bias. This bias of kind of anticipating something bad happening. This was pointed out to me by a dear friend recently about myself. And it's like, I know this about myself. And I think other people see, like, oh, you got all this good stuff going on, and have to be the ones to point it out to me and say, where's your gratitude? Like, you're totally abundant, dude. Like, what's happening? And then the judgment and the shame of myself. What? I must be an ungrateful bitch. Like, why am I not feeling this? I'm not feeling it, partly because my body is attuned to expecting, when is the other shoe going to drop? When is the bad thing going to happen? Now, this can be from a specific bad event in the past. I think some of it's linked to my sister's death when I was a teenager and made a huge imprint on me. I think some of it's linked to my chronic illness, where my body's on this low hum of waiting. When am I going to be unwell enough where I can't carry on? But all of us have it. All of us have it, no matter what major life events or not that we've had. There's just like this low hum of being in the society. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way that our bodies kind of just try to like modulate and decide, well, this is the more likely thing to happen. So even if it feels like there's all this, where other people are noticing all this abundance, our bodies get attuned to this negative bias, and they're waiting for the bad thing to happen, even with the good. So that means that we can't feel the good. It's not that we're ungrateful. It's not that, all the other things. It's that we really can't feel it in our bodies. Our bodies have a barrier to it, an armor to it, if you will, a way of saying, like, this can't penetrate me. Because if it does, then I'll be soft or mushy. I won't be vigilant. That's the hypervigilance is the way that we walk around, especially in cities, of keeping ourselves like on point. I got to make sure that no one's coming at me like the wrong person, the wrong energy, the wrong, whatever. That's how we keep ourselves safe. So we also keep ourselves blocked from pleasure. So how do we learn how to be in pleasure? Well, that's why I do the work that I do. Because it doesn't come second nature, even though it's in our bodies and attuned, and it's like our bodies, want to desperately go there. We need guidance with it. Our bodies are a real teacher. But to be working with someone and have someone witness and maybe make suggestions just to allow you to be in that space, to be in your body, to be like, what is arising in me? Where do I want to place my hands? What does this breath feel like? And I'm just not talking about sensual pleasure. I'm talking about all the things. The fact that I just came up from sitting outside and what that sunshine feels like on my skin, listening to the birds, feeling my hands on the blades of grass. All of that sinks into the body and rewrites this trauma response, this response of looking for the worst case scenario that is in us for a reason. So what happens when we're in our pleasure? Every fucking thing, everything. So I knew on this path, I've always been an intense person, and I knew when I was involved in social activism that there was something missing for me. Not only because I was coming from a place of anger, but I was around a lot of other people with tight bodies who had a us versus them mentality. And there was a lot of turmoil going on. It was only feeding the same thing. It was feeding the same thing that we were fighting, which is these lofty leaders who are making decisions because they're not connected to their bodies, because they're not connected to their yes and no, because they're not connected to their pleasure, what feels good. I don't believe that a lot of people like to do bad things to other people because it feels good. They do it because they're dissociated. So how do we come back into our bodies? When we come back into our bodies, we cannot be controlled. We know our yes and no. We know how to navigate our lives. We may feel how our decisions impact other people, but we don't come in from a place of apology, a place of, I need to explain my existence. I need to make sure that I'm, doing all the right things, da, 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 da. We're coming from a place of embodied pleasure. Pleasure has to be felt in our bodies. And if you're into this whole, it's this kind of the polyvagal nerve theory, it's coming into more of a mainstream. The reality is the simplicity, the way to basically say it, is we receive a ton more information, like 90%, a ton more information from our body to our brains than the other way around. So we're in these industrialized cultures that are very brain heavy. There's nothing wrong with the brain. There's nothing wrong with rational thought. There's nothing wrong with using it. But the reality is our bodies are still attuned to receive most of the information the other way. So this is where that animalistic limbic system, fight or flight, when we're receiving information and our stress response is going on high all the time, we can also infuse our bodies with pleasure to bring more of that information in, which then changes our mind state. It changes how we make decisions. It changes how we navigate in this super heady world, because now we're getting more information from the body that's of pleasure, not of pain, not of just chronic pain and aches and tiredness and numbness and whatever other information that we're used to getting from the body. When we can bring pleasure into that same information travels upwards. So what impact does this have on the world? Everything. Can you imagine a world where people are primarily in their pleasure? And I'm not talking about, because a lot of people got stigma around this. A lot of people have, I think, impressions of what I do and what my life is like. Oh, you're just like foo-fooing around and, fucking anything that moves. And, it's all just about sexy times for you. No. It is an active, subversive state. It is a subversive act of resistance to say, I choose pleasure. I will be in my pleasure, even though all the stimulus, everything that's coming from throughout is telling us otherwise. It is to make that is why Adrienne Marie, who I follow, who just wrote Pleasure Activism, read that book. It's about that pleasure is activism. It's not an afterthought. It's not once I've done all the efficiency mode and my work and all the other things, then I'll get to pleasure. Sex is for the end of the day, if I'm not too tired, if I've done all the other things. No. Pleasure is what feeds all the other things. It's what allows those things to be in our authenticity. It allows us to be in our purpose in life, to be in ease. And when we're in ease, we can move around this world with like realness. And then we're in our purpose. Maybe your purpose is to, work for a cigarette company. Maybe your purpose is to do something that other people may judge as not in integrity or moral. But it's like you're in your body, you're in your purpose, you're in your pleasure. But I bet there would be a ton more of us who would be in doing embodied work and artistry and revolutionary acts of literature and, just like the whole scope, you would be in your pleasure as you were doing therapy with people. You would be in your pleasure as you were teaching. Whatever it is, it shores and forget about it, as far as illness is concerned, as far as chronic conditions, as far as abuse and violence, not only to our loved ones, but to whole communities, to the environment. People in pleasure don't make the same decisions. They don't do the same things because they are aware of their bodies, what is good and what is bad. If you want to put those labels on, you can feel it. And so you know how that impacts other things. You make different decisions. You run in different circles. You call out different things. Pleasure changes everything. It is not an afterthought. It is not a foo-foo whatever. It's not people who have the luxury and the indulgence and the time and the money to finally care about this. It is our right to feel in our bodies. This is why I do what I do. I love it. You can always work with me. You can work with any other sexological body worker, responsible tantric worker. This is, you can be taught how to do this if you don't know how to do this. You can go to 5 Rhythms, other dance classes, just getting into your body, getting into your pleasure. If you don't know how to do it, you can be guided. There are a ton of people to follow on Instagram. There's a ton of IGTV to watch. There's, you can do this. But that's why I'm going back to school, to learn even more, make it even more accessible to folks, money-wise, accessibility, as far as, diversity, a full range of people from all over the world, through video, whatever. I'm still raising funds for tuition. I'm going to put that underneath here. I believe super strong in what I do, and I believe in this spreading everywhere. If you have any questions around anything that I've just said, let me know. You can tell I love talking about this. Okay, pleasure on.